The information provided in this program is of a general nature and is not intended to be personalised financial advice. We encourage you to seek appropriate advice from a qualified professional to suit your individual circumstances. Qantas Chief Executive Alan Joyce explains how it's making more money per passenger than it was before COVID.
Probably every airline in the world is, because you've got this massive demand and supply still constrained.
It's Monday the 19th of June and you're watching Markets with Madison. Airlines have got to be one of the most insane turnaround stories. They've spent the past few years struggling to survive. Now they're back with a more profitable business model. Aussie airline Qantas is making more money than the market expected. It's forecasting a $2.5 billion Australian dollar underlying profit this financial year. And it's not even back at full capacity yet. COVID caused Qantas Airways to post $7 billion Australian dollars in losses. Borders being closed meant it missed out on at least $25 billion in revenue. Like many airlines, it laid off thousands of staff, grounded at least 100 aircraft, and halted dividends. While airlines in other countries got government loans, Qantas went cap in hand to shareholders, raising $1.9 billion in equity, including issuing new shares under a $1.4 billion placement. Shareholders are yet to be rewarded with resumed dividends, but the share price is rising and the business is booming. Qantas is now priced above $6 Australian, closing in on the $7.40 peak before the pandemic, and far from the low of $1.12 it traded at in 2021. The airline's capacity for the full financial year is expected to be 96% domestically and 67% internationally. Qantas is now so optimistic about its recovery, it recently upped its recent share buyback by another 100 mil, taking it to 600 mil. And it's launching new routes, starting a direct Auckland to New York 16-hour flight last week, competing for passengers with Air New Zealand. It's part of what the airline calls Project Sunrise, a plan to dominate ultra-long-haul travel. Qantas Chief Executive Alan Joyce was in New Zealand before the flight took off. Alan, so good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Good to see you. It's great to be here, yeah.
It's pretty remarkable that you're here and that you are now launching flights direct from Auckland to New York, right?
Yeah.
Because COVID wiped out $7 billion, 5 years worth of profitability.
Yes.
No money coming in, really,
Yes.
would have just eroded your free cash flow. So talk me through the financial health of the airline currently.
Yeah, so that period of time back in 2020 was the worst we've ever seen, because we were at a stage where we literally had 11 weeks of cash left to survive. So we had to take some dramatic action, do a massive restructuring of the business, to take $1 billion out of our cost base, change a lot of what we were doing with fleet, retire the 747s. And all of that has helped us come out of COVID stronger than we went into COVID. So we're going to make up to $2.475 billion this year, which is $1 billion more than we were making before COVID. Our balance sheet now is the strongest it's ever been, with net debt levels below $2.7 billion. When we went into COVID, it was a lot higher than that. And we're now so financially strong that we've got the biggest re-equipment plan in our history, where we've got one new aircraft arriving every 3 weeks, and the cash flows to afford that and to continue to invest for our customers and deliver to our shareholders.
Government support would have been quite crucial in that process.
So we actually hadn't got a huge amount of government support directly. Our people did. So in total, the government worked with Qantas and gave Qantas just over $2 billion. $1 billion of that went to our people in what was called Job Saver, because we stood down over 20,000 people during COVID because we didn't have work for them. Another $1 billion of that was the government renting our aircraft to operate freight flights. So we flew passenger aircraft empty with freight in the hold to keep Australian produce to the rest of the world. And we also flew domestic flights when the borders closed down to keep the states open. And so the government gave us $1 billion, and most of that went on costs, fuel and aircraft and crew expenditure. The biggest money we got was we raised equity of over 1.4 billion from our shareholders, and we raised debt of over 2.4 billion dollars to get through COVID. And as I said, we've paid back the debt, and we've paid back now over $1 billion of the equity that we've raised.
Do you think that Australian taxpayers and the government should have been given some sort of return for that support that they gave you in a way of an equity stake, or is that something that you wanted to intentionally avoid for the sake of your existing investors?
So again, what we thought is that the government money was better spent on our people rather than on the company, so it went to our people. And it wasn't their fault that the borders got closed for public health reasons, so I think it was the right thing for the government to do. And Qantas wasn't the only company which had JobKeeper, which again went to people that hadn't got work coming in and helped them get through the pandemic. What we're now doing is, because we're now back making money and paying taxes, so we are actually contributing that money back through paying taxes, and we pay all sorts of forms of taxes, ticket taxes, fuel excise duty, and eventually we'll pay corporate tax again when we run through the tax losses. So that's how the company is contributing back to the government's contribution that they made to our people.
Well, borders are back open. I hear domestic demand in Australia is going incredibly well.
Yeah.
But why is international capacity not back to 100% yet? What's stopping that from hitting back to pre-COVID levels?
Yeah, there's a lot of different reasons to get the international capacity up and running. The first thing is a lot of people retired aircraft because they thought there was going to be a long recovery. Like we retired the 747s, and there was a view this would be worse than the global financial crisis. It would be worse than September the 11th. Well, it turned out that snapped back nearly immediately, and nobody predicted that. The second issue that's an issue is the manufacturers they have supply chain issues, so the production of new aircraft is taking longer. So the aircraft we're flying tomorrow is a brand new 787, but it's 2 years late in its arrival. And then the third issue is there's a massive training pipeline that the system was never designed for. So our A380 pilots, as an example, were driving buses for 2 years, some of them were. And to train them back up into the aircraft needs 23 hours of simulator time, 5 sectors where they're checked by a check-in training captain, and the system was never set up to have that bulk of training. So that takes a while for us to get through that.
Are you making more revenue per passenger across the group now than before COVID?
We are, and I think nearly probably every airline in the world is, because you've got this massive demand and supply still constrained. But as we see supply coming back on, and like in domestic Australia, we're now back over 100% of pre-COVID capacity, and internationally we'll get to 100% next March. We are seeing airfares come back down and normalise, and RASK is coming back. It's still going to be higher than it was in 19, because of course we've had nearly 4 years of inflation, so you'd expect it to be higher.
So are you making more money per bum on seat effectively purely because of that supply and demand pressure on pricing, or is it also because of things like route and cost efficiency post-COVID too?
Yeah, it's a combination. Last year, the year we're just closing, we had revenue per ASK, as we would relate it, was at high levels, particularly international, but CASK was high because we didn't have all of our cost per ASK was high because we didn't have all our aircraft in the air. We had them on the ground to cover all of the supply chain issues, and we had all the people for those aircraft still employed. But as we get those aircraft in the air, our costs are coming down and our RASK is coming down, and we think that this profitability step change we currently have is a step change and will continue from now on.
Well, how are you going to balance that? Because there's a lot of pressure on bringing pricing back down to make it more accessible, but then you also obviously want to capture this better profitability model. So what's your foresight for pricing, and where do you see that finding a floor, and does that floor still have you capturing some extra profitability?
Yeah, it's a great question. We think you have to get the balance right between what you contribute to shareholders, what you have for customers, and what you contribute to your employees. So this year we're actually giving all of our employees the equivalent of nearly a $12,000 bonus, having coming out at a tough time. We're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in new product on Qantas, and then billions of dollars in new aircraft for our customers. And then for our shareholders, we're also giving a return back. But also on customers, you're right about airfares. And we've said that this year alone, Jetstar, part of the Qantas group, will have 10 million airfares below $100. Now, when you think of that, less than $100 to fly between all of the major capitals in Australia and in New Zealand. Taxi fares would cost you proportionally more than that. So there's still huge value in aviation, there's huge value at the price-sensitive end of the market, and there's huge value on product and investment in product for the less price-sensitive end of the premium market as well.
What's your ideal Brent crude price in USD?
Oh, ideal, $0.
It's 72 US dollars this morning. It's been dropping. Will that contribute to lower inflation?
It will. So at the moment, when we did the year we're just closing, our fuel prices were over $1 billion more than they were in 19. So we had to pass that on to the consumer. So it's a big part of the inflation that people were seeing. And as oil prices come down, again, the history of aviation is that benefit in oil prices eventually passed on to the consumer, because the airlines always compete away.
I'll pass that $0 advice on to OPEC for you then, Alan.
I'm sure there's no chance they'll give you that, but that would be great.
How would you rate Qantas customer service quality currently, out of 10, 10 being the best, 0 being the worst?
So we had a bad period last year when, like a lot of airlines around the globe, we didn't deliver the customer service people were expecting. There were lots of reasons why, but we apologised for it, and then we said we're going to fix it. And we spent over $200 million in having spare aircraft, spare crew, and now for 10 months of the last 11, Qantas has been the best on-time performance of any domestic operator in Australia. We've got the best, lowest level of cancellation rates, and our lost bags, our mishandled bags, are 18% lower than they were before COVID. Our call answering time is down. I think last week or the week before it was 1 minute on average to get through. Yes. So
I've always waited longer than a minute for any humour.
So our customer service levels we've dramatically improved. Do we want to improve even further? We absolutely do. And Skytrax, which is the independent assessor of the ratings of airlines, they've moved Qantas from the year before last from 8th place to last year 5th place in the world, the 5th best airline. And it was the only airline in this region that actually improved its position in Skytrax. Every other airline got worse in this region compared to where they were the previous year.
It's all good and well to say that it was poor performing and now you've improved on it.
Yeah.
But looking back, what did you learn from that poor performance? What do you think caused that poor quality of service?
So there was a combination of a number of things that hit us. One, and you could say hindsight's a great thing. You can always look back and say, maybe we should have predicted this. But when Australia opened, we in particular had a big surge in COVID going through the community, and then sick leave spiked. And we didn't have enough reserves to cover that sick leave. It got to 20%. In some areas, like we had ground handling in Melbourne, 50% of people on a weekend were going sick. So there's no way airlines were planning for that. Maybe you say we should have, but I don't think anybody plans for 50% of your staff going sick on one day. The second thing that was a problem, we didn't realise the manufacturers had supply chain issues. So I'll give you an example. Jetstar had a windscreen that went on a 787. We usually have 2 in stores. They're on restricted access because Boeing are not producing enough of them. And we had to wait 12 days to get that windscreen. That aircraft was out of the system for 12 days. So we didn't expect that, because you usually get these aircraft back in the air within 24 hours. So we then had to plan for 25 aircraft to be spare in the system, and we had to plan for our reserves being twice the levels they were, and that's why we invested that 200 million, and then that helped fix it. Still today, we still have some issues that are out of our control, like air traffic control is a real problem. They're having high levels of sick leave, high days when restrictions apply from air traffic control, and we have to do cancellations because of that. So the system is not perfectly back to where it was before 19, but we're compensating in other ways for those flaws.
I want to talk to you about Auckland Airport's increase in charges. They're asking you effectively to pay for their infrastructure pipeline. You've come out with Air New Zealand saying you don't like that idea, but that's no different to any other international airport model. You pay landing charges to use all of them.
Yes.
So what do you specifically not like about this plan?
Well, usually in an airport we have good consultation about what the plans are. So let's say you're renting a house from me, and I'm saying to you, and which is what Auckland Airport are saying, I'm going to build a garage, and I'm going to build a conservatory, and I'm going to charge you not only the cost but a margin on top of that. And you say back to them, but I don't even have a car. Why do I want a garage? And they're saying, sorry, we're consulting with you by just telling you this is what we're doing. And we're saying, well, that's a bit unfair, because we think this spec of what you're building is just too great. It's a Taj Mahal. It's too elaborate. And if we work together, we could put that spec down. We've no problem you making money. And we should be making money as well, and that's fine. But for both of our customers, or passengers that go through your terminals, if you overspec this, charge too much for it, and airfares get too high, that's bad for all of us, and that's what we think is happening. And we would rather them sit down like every other airport in the world does, work with our consultants, with our people, to spec this out to a level that's acceptable to both parties.
Now you're leaving.
Yes.
I want to speak about your tenure.
Yes.
There's been some big executive decisions that you've made, and you've worn them, and you've never shied away from them. Probably notably, looking back on your tenure, was about 10 years ago, where you made the decision, because of industrial action, to ground Qantas's entire fleet.
Yeah.
27,000 staff didn't go to work that day. You made that call on your own. I want to just go into the mind of Alan Joyce for a moment. When you make such a big call and you personally wear it, how do you make those decisions? Do you write a pros and cons list? Do you have best and worst case scenarios in your head?
So what I do, my background is a science background, a maths background. So the way I've always taught is sort of the scientific method, that you formulate a hypothesis about what you think the answer to a problem is, and then you have discussions, debates, and seek advice to either prove or disprove it. So we have very robust discussions as a senior management team with people querying, questioning, and challenging, because that's the only way that works. And then you have difference of opinion. You also need a very diverse team, because if everybody comes from the same background, then it's going to be groupthink. So we have a very diverse group of individuals. We've got now, we hit the 40-40-20 in diversity on our senior management team. And we've got people that have come from government affairs, people that are mathematicians, people that are accountants, people that are engineers, people that are scientists, from a huge variety of backgrounds. So the debate comes from all different angles. And then in the middle of it, you could get somebody that puts a fact on the table, or puts a perspective on the table that makes you change your mind, and you know that the answer you were going down was wrong, and you change direction. And that's sort of how we work as a team. It needs very diverse, very inclusive, and people that are willing to debate, to make decisions at the end of the day. And then there's a great Theodore Roosevelt quote that I've been using all the way through COVID and before COVID, and he says, at the point of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing. And I think that's been the philosophy we've worked on, because a lot of businesses get into analysis paralysis and people don't make decisions, and that can be a disaster. You're better off trying something, and if it doesn't work, change it rapidly rather than just sitting back and not making a call.
How would you sum up your tenure in one word, if you could?
I think it's been a roller coaster ride. Maybe that's the best way of putting it. It's had its ups and downs, and probably roller coaster would sum it up more than anything.
I think that's fair. Alan, thank you so much.
Thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
If you bought airline stocks during the pandemic and have since benefited from their recovery, I want to hear from you. Or if you're thinking of getting in now, what do you think the upside opportunity still is to come for air travel? Now go and put your money to work. Thanks for watching Markets with Madison, the New Zealand Herald show for interested investors. If you want to stay up to date with financial markets, click the subscribe button below and you can watch our other episodes here. Stay up to date with all the business news and numbers as they land on nzherald.co.nz.